Hi, everybody. I am Jim Harold, the host of the Paranormal podcast and Jim Harold's Campfire. And I started podcasting 18 years ago, just celebrated my anniversary with the Paranormal podcast. And then in 2009, I started a show called Jim Harold's Campfire. It's basically a show where people come on and share their spooky stories of all sorts. It could be UFOs, cryptid creatures, ghosts, my favorite head scratchers. We'll hear some of those. And when I first started the show, it was actually a special episode of the Paranormal podcast. And the reason I did it was simply because I did not have an episode for that week. So I thought, wouldn't it be fun to have people come on and tell their spooky stories? And it got such a great reaction. I said, aha, there's another show here. And we started Jim Harold's Campfire. And honestly, when I first started the show, I thought, you know, this is a nice little thing. It's a little diversion from my main show. It'll be fun to sit around and tell campfire stories around a virtual campfire. But over time, I came to realize that, yes, it's all of those things, but it's also much more. I think that people need outlets, and not just mine. There's multiples, and it goes back to radio. This is certainly not an original idea, but people need places where they know that like-minded people will gather and share stories without judgment, and that's what we try to do on the Campfire. You come on, you tell your story. I'm not going to cross-examine you. I'm not going to say you're making it up. I'm going to listen and respect what you have to say. So I thought for this excellent situation that I've been asked to participate in, that I would give you a compilation of some of my favorite campfire stories and also give you some reflections on why it's important that we listen to experiencers, we respect experiencers, and we give them the space to share their stories. First up, this is actually one of the very early stories of the Campfire, and then we were able to record it on video something like 12 years later. This is Leanne, who has a really wild story about a Ouija board.
Okay, so I was about 14 or 15, and I went to my friend's house after school, and we were trying to figure out something to do, so she suggested pulling out her Ouija board. And we set it up on the floor, and she turned out all the lights and put a lava lamp right next to it to enhance the experience or the spookiness. So she starts asking it questions like, is anybody there? And it seemed to be responding. And then she started asking for a sign, which is a question I hate, but she did it. And nothing was really happening that we noticed as far as the sign. So she just continued asking questions. And I noticed out of the corner of my eye that the lava lamp seemed to be doing something weird. All of the wax bubbles in the lamp were combining into one big ball.
So the lava lamp, if people remember, they were those lamps. I mean, I have my jellyfish lamp back here that is basically fake jellyfish. But these lava lamps, they were very popular, and they had kind of a resurgence around the time you're talking about. And they're little globs of wax that come up. And I just wanted to put that out there in case people didn't remember what they were. But I always loved them. I love kitschy stuff like that. There's evidence behind me. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
So the little wax balls were all moving together to form this one ball in the center of the lamp. And I just continued to watch it. And I got my friend's attention as well, saying, Bridget, look at the lamp. And we start watching it, and it starts to form a shape. And it began to make the shape of a head. And it was the devil's head. It had horns. It had very thick brows that were very angry and scowling. It had a long kind of square face and a broad jaw. And it also had fangs, and its mouth was kind of like opening, like it was growling at us. And the whole time, the ball never moved within the water like you would think it would. It just stayed stationary in the center. And once all the details of this wax face. Once we recognized what it was, I yelled, "Oh my God, it's the devil." And we both took our hands off the board, and it just went back to wax bubbles as soon as we did that. And we ended it right then and there. And I think I went home.
Oh my. So, the fact that when you took your hands off, it just dissipated. Now, some people would say, well, maybe this was just it would kind of look like and reminded you of a devil's head. But if I recall correctly from what you said, there was no mistaking what this was. This was very detailed and very distinct. Is that correct?
Yes, there was no mistaking. It had very distinct details of the eyes. I remember the eyes and the fangs, and I could see all the teeth, and it was very, very detailed. So it wasn't like a blur or shadow or something that could be mistaken, because we were in the dark with just this lamp on. And the fact that it didn't move at all and the mouth kind of opened like a growl, there was no mistaking.
Now, I believe in life, things happen to us and they have implications decades later, and we don't even realize it. We may not realize it at the time, but we look back and we say, wow, that impacted this all these years later. Now, my family was from Appalachia. Some people say Appalachia. I say Appalachia. But anyway, from West Virginia. I grew up in Ohio, but every summer I would go down there. And one of my favorite things was sitting on the front porch, not the deck, the front porch, and sharing stories. And inevitably, it would get to the spooky stories, which I specifically loved. And I think part of the reason that I ended up doing Campfire subconsciously without even knowing it was that oral tradition. And no better example is this story from my dad, who is now 87 years old and thankfully still with us. But he tells this story that happened probably around 1970 of him and my mom and a very strange experience they had. And it fits with Ryan's motif. This is very much a UFO story. And again, I think this in some ways inspired my whole career path, my interest in the paranormal, and the importance of respecting storytellers. Here's my dad's story.
Well, one night about 11 o'clock, we was back in the mountains on vacation, and me and your mom decided to take a ride through the mountain. And we pulled off and went up an old log road, and we stopped in there. We stopped for a while, and I had a bottle of beer. I was drinking a bottle of beer, and it was pitch dark.
Yeah.
You couldn't hardly see anything. It was pitch dark. We were sitting there talking, and all of a sudden, there was a light so bright that when it lit up, it lit the whole car up on the inside and everything around it. You could see the minute hand on that clock on the car. It was so bright. Mm-hmm. Only lasted for about 3 seconds, but I looked out the side window, and it seemed like it was a person standing there. He looked, maybe he was maybe a shoulder length to the glass in the side of the door.
Yeah.
And it looks like he had some sort of a welding mask on.
So did it look like it was, do you think it was a human being? Do you think it was, what do you think it was?
Well, it was something standing there, but I turned to your mom and for her to look, and turned around, it was gone. Mm-hmm. But then it kind of scared me, so we got out of there, went down and went on the other road and started out of there. Mm-hmm. And there was all kind of birds. Well, I was 4 or 5 of them up along the bank. Mm-hmm. It's the biggest birds I ever seen. I never did see anything like it.
Now, when you say they were birds, how big were they? Do you think? I mean, I know it's almost 40 years ago, but what did they look like that you can remember?
They was just big birds. They had a wingspan. I don't know how big he was, but the way you could see them, I think it was about 4 of them. And about every 50 feet or 100 feet, you could see 1 or 2 up along the bank. But that's what I seen, and your mom seen it too. But your mom didn't see the person standing there beside the car. And this was back up in the mountains. There's no traffic or nothing. And I thought, well, tomorrow you'll hear somebody is saying they saw a light, but I never did hear no more about it. So
now, when you saw that light, I mean, you said that was so it lit up the whole sky.
Oh, it lit up everything. Oh, you could see the background of the trees and everything, side of the hills and everything. But it didn't last long. It was only about not even a minute. I don't think. I know it scared me, and I got out of there. That's all I know.
And then, did it change the way you thought about things when people said they'd see a UFO or they saw something weird? Did it change the way you thought about all that?
Well, I never did believe in things like that, but when I see something with my own eyes, then I believe it. And your mom was there too, and I asked her, I said, what do you think that was? She said, I have no idea, but we never did take another ride back out there after that.
Family has always been a big part of the stories that we tell around the campfire. And I think it's important to respect not only adult storytellers, but experiencers who are children, because I believe that somehow children have a glimpse beyond the veil. They are closer to the veil. They have just passed over. So maybe they see things that we miss. And one of the most interesting things that we've covered over the years is the question of reincarnation. And do children come across with real stories of past life experiences? This is one such story we did about a year ago, I think. And it's Kate from the United Kingdom. And boy, isn't it an amazing story for sure.
So there really it relates to a few conversations that I had when they were very little. So in each case, the conversations were had with them when they were about 3.5. The first of which is with my eldest daughter. So like I say, she was about 3.5, and it was just the two of us sitting around a table playing with Play-Doh one afternoon. Her little brother was just a baby, so he was upstairs taking a nap, and Dad was out the house, and we were just sitting together. And she started looking a little bit sad, and then she looked up at me and she said, Mummy, sometimes I really miss my father. And I kind of looked a bit sort of sideways at her. We don't use the word father, she's 3.5, her dad is Daddy, and that was kind of it, really. Right. So I said, Mummy, do you mean Daddy? He said, he's at work, but he'll be home in a couple of hours, so you can see him, so don't worry. She said, no, not Daddy, my father. And I said, well, what do you mean? I said, because Daddy's your father. Father is a word for Daddy. And she said, no, not Daddy. My father from before. My father with the white beard. And I was like, well, that's certainly not your dad, who's like in his 30s with jet black hair at the time. So I kind of said, well, who do you mean? And she said, yeah, no, my father from before with the white beard. And wow. I was a bit baffled. Yeah, a bit weird. And again, the use of the language was quite odd for a 3.5-year-old to kind of come out with. And so I started asking her questions about it. So I said, well, so tell me a bit more about who's your father? Who's this father that you keep talking about? And she said that she remembers him, he was very kind, and they lived together in a house made of wood. And she kind of described something that could be like a cabin or perhaps like a chalet or something like that. And she used to live in this house with her father, who had what she called a waist jacket with a watch on a chain that he kept in his pocket, which obviously I'm guessing means like a pocket watch in a waistcoat, and she said that she could remember she lived in a house. The house was by some woods and near a river, and she used to play by the woods. And she could remember things like she remembers making bread in the house. Wow. And nobody else lived there. And then I was trying to ask her questions without leading her, because she was very little, and I kind of just wanted to know where this was going really and where it might have come from. Because apart from anything else, I thought I might have maybe I'd missed something she'd been watching, like a movie on TV or something, and that I hadn't seen. And it was quite a specific set of memories that she came out with. And actually, the emotions that she was expressing seemed really genuine. She was really sad. She missed him, But after a while, no more information was sort of forthcoming, and we kind of just left it at that. I told her dad when he came home from work, and he was just as baffled as I was, and we couldn't really understand where it all come from, but we kind of let it be. And that was kind of that, except for about 3 weeks later, again, we were at home together, probably similar time, little brother having a nap. And she was climbing over the furniture. So she was trying to climb up the back of a chair to get something I'd put on a shelf high up out of her reach. And I told her to get down. So get down, that's dangerous. Get off the chair. And went off to do some other chore or other. And I came back and she was doing it again. So I sort of told her off. I said, look, that's really naughty. If I tell you not to do something, I'm telling you to keep you safe because it's dangerous. Don't do it. And she looked at me solemnly and she went, yeah. That's like what happened to Frida, because her parents told her not to play in the river, and she did, and she hit her head and she died. And then she sort of went on to back to And at this point, my jaw was literally on the floor. And apart from anything else, you think that's such an unusual name. I don't think I've ever met anyone called Frida.
Yeah, certainly for the modern day, yeah, very unusual.
Yeah, very weird. And it kind of piqued my interest enough for me to remember, obviously, the conversation we'd had some weeks previously. And the next time I took her to nursery, so like preschool, I spoke to her, the member of staff that looked after her, and I said, look, have you been reading any books or seeing anything recently with a character called Frida in it? And she was like, no. I said, what about stories that are in like a log cabin or in a chalet or by the woods? Or is there anything with a man with a white beard and a waistcoat in it? And she kind of started looking at me a bit sideways, like, no. So that was literally the only other thing I could think of where she might have gathered this story together. But it was such a abstract collection of things for her to put together and make into a story and then tell from a first person perspective. I can't think of any rational reason why it would be anything other than memories of something that had obviously happened to her before.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Now, as much as there's a serious side to the campfire, we love a good creepy story just like anybody else. And this is one of our favorites. This is Michael from a few years ago from California. Now, I'll set this up a bit because we catch it halfway into the story. Basically, he had gone shopping at an estate sale for some goods for a place that he and his wife had just gotten. They needed some furniture. They'd gone the first time, and they found that everything was a little bit too pricey for them. But they left their information with the person putting on the sale and said, hey, call us if you decide to get rid of some of these things at a little bit lower price. And Michael may have gotten more than he bargained for in this classic campfire story.
And then my phone rang, and I answered. She goes, hi, it's Linda. I was like, who? She goes, the lady from the yard sale. She's like, I've got those chairs you wanted, and there's this. She used a lot of expletives. She was really colorful. She was in an argument with somebody about these things I wanted to buy, and she'd wanted like $500 for them originally. She said, I'll give them to you for $50. Some chairs, and I'm like, $50 each. She goes, no, just $50. I'll give you both of them. This guy here is totally disrespecting me, and he's lowballing me, and she's arguing with him. I'll give him to you for $50 because I don't want him to have him. I'm like, okay. She goes, and that mirror that was in the carport, if you want it, you can get it out of here. I think you're the one that's supposed to have it. I'm like, okay. So
interesting comment.
yeah. And it's like, thanks. But we took it. And I mean, the thing's huge, and it's meant to be hung horizontally, but the walls just couldn't support it. So we set it up vertically and had it in the corner of the living room where we were living. And during that time, I was working kind of late nights into the early morning at like a restaurant club, and my wife was working super early in the morning. So I would get home at 1 or 1:30 in the morning. She would have to get up at 3, and she has a very difficult time getting up in the morning. So for weeks, I would go to bed at like 2. I'd wake up at 3 and make coffee and have a cup of coffee with her. And then I would sleep on the couch, which was in the living room where the mirror was. And one morning, it was the same routine. I would sort of curl up on my side, and one of the cats would sleep behind my legs. And I was laying on the couch, and all of a sudden the couch shook. I'm like, oh, earthquake. And I sat up and I looked, and there was a crowd of people in the living room. And I'm thinking, what's going on? I'm dazed. I'm just coming out of sleep. And it was like 11 people, something standing in the room. And there was one man that was standing sort of in the forefront. It was very much in focus, but everyone else was kind of blurry. And he had like kind of brown hair, a little bit slicked back, who was scruffy, had on a vest and like an ascot thing, and was wearing big boots. And he just stood there with his hands behind the back and looked at me. And I was like, what the, a lot of expletives. What are you doing? And he just stood there. And then there was this really brief conversation. The thing, it was weird. It's like his mouth didn't move, but I was having a conversation. Like, what the F are you doing in my house? And he just kind of looked at me and goes, we came with a mirror. And what? He goes, we came with a mirror. And I just kind of obviously in shock and what the hell's going on? It was really quick. And then he says, we came with a mirror. We love to dance. We love to have parties. We love to watch ourselves dance in that mirror. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Whatever. What are you doing? And he just looks at me and he says, we never got our last dance. And then he leaned in really close to me on the couch and he says, that's where you come in. And I like do this thing and I'm like, Dad, what is this? And then the room's empty and I'm like, wow, that's the coolest dream I've ever had. That's the most vivid dream I've ever had. That's great. I'm gonna have to tell my wife about that. And that's what a great story. I can because I live in Hollywood and all that. I'm like, well, maybe I can turn this into something. Maybe that's a great thing. And kind of blew it off as just a really vivid nightmare. Then my cat sits up, and this is a cat that's not bothered by anything, and starts hissing at the mirror.
Ooh.
Jolts back, and she runs upstairs, and she hid for the rest of the day. And I told my wife about it. She goes, oh, that's cool. Doesn't just nonplussed. And then I think like the next week I was at work and she was at home, and I get a text. She's like, are you home? I'm like, no. She says, there's somebody upstairs. I'm like, what are you talking about? She says, it sounds like there's a bunch of people upstairs. Because at that point we had taken the mirror and we had moved it up to our second bedroom, which was an office. She goes, it sounds like there's a bunch of people moving around up there. And I'm like, don't go up there. She goes, no, I'm going to go up. And she goes up, she's like, there's nobody up there. And so for weeks, at different times of night, it was usually like 9:15ish. You would just hear, it would sound like boots and people moving around upstairs. And it's like, it's a townhouse. So there's nobody above us. And next to us was a lady who at that time lived by herself, and she mostly stayed downstairs. So, and we didn't share other walls. And it was just really strange. So that was like 2008. For the next few years, some really disconcerting things happened in the house. You know, you'd hear the noises, and then like my wife would text, I just saw somebody walk into the office. It's like, what are you talking about?
And the best part of that story is that he's actually sitting in front of the mirror. He kept it. He's got a lot more guts than I do. And a lot of things happened after this, and he talks about them on the actual episode. But I wanted you to get the gist of that story because that's a spooky one. Now, one of my favorite things about Campfire, and I've found this over the years, when dealing with skeptics, they say this. They say, I don't believe in any of this stuff. It's too incredible for me. Now, there was this one time. They all have one of those stories, or most of them that I've met. And they still say, not supernatural, but kind of a wild story. And this one that we just literally had on the Campfire in the last few weeks is from Celeste. And she tells this incredible story about a psychic reading.
Gosh, 22 years ago, I went on a trip with my then boyfriend. His name's David. And David and I went to New Orleans. And we did this haunted mystery walking tour. It was like this great day and felt kind of spooky. And we found ourselves at Jackson Square. And there were all these tables lined up with different knickknacks, and people were selling their wares. And one of them had this lady, and she was just sitting there by herself. And she had a sign that said palm reading. And I looked at my boyfriend and I was like, I've never had my palm read. He's like, you should go get your palm read. So I walked up to this lady and gave her my money. And I said, you know, tell me, she asked me, she was like, what do you want to know? Do you want to know about your future? Do you want to know about what's happening now? And I was like, thinking in my head, I think that this guy that I'm with is the one.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm fairly sure that he is.
You found him.
I'm sorry.
I said you found him. You felt that you had found the guy.
Exactly. I thought that was the dude. And I wasn't sure that the feeling was mutual. We'd been together for a few years. So in my head, I was like, I want to know if I'm going to if this is truly my guy. So I said, tell me about my future. Tell me who I end up with, what, And so she takes my hand and she looks at it and she says, you're going to end up with a guy whose name begins with M. And I just remember side-eyeing my boyfriend because there was no M in his name. Nothing. There was no M. And I was like, okay, you probably got that part wrong. And she looks at my palm and she said, and you're going to have 4 children. And I was like, 4 children? Well, I better get started now. And I said this aloud and she puts up her hand. She's like, no. I didn't necessarily say they were all your kids.
Ooh.
And I was like, yeah. So fast forward to now. And I did not end up with this guy named David. I ended up with a man named Matt who had 3 children from a prior relationship. And he and I have Carter.
Wow.
4 children and the guy whose name starts with M.
Wow. So she said that it would be with an M. She said that you'd have 4 children. And essentially, that's exactly what has happened.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have a saying, too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence. What do you think?
I mean, these are very specific details about my life. I don't know what to think. It's a cool story. That's what I think. I like telling it.
And when you talk about respect, I want to make a point here about Celeste and all skeptics. I think if we expect respect from skeptics, we have to give it back the other way. So Celeste had her story. She's still obviously not a believer, but you know what? That's okay. And I give her a lot of credit for being on the show. And again, we've had many skeptics on our various shows. I've had Dr. Michael Shermer, Joe Nickel, Ben Radford. So we're no strangers to skeptics. And as long as they're respectful and can have a good dialogue, I'm all for it. I think we need a lot more of that in the world today. And something else we need are unbelievably great campfire stories that are worthy of the Twilight Zone. And this is just such a story. And this is a story from T.I., and this is my all-time favorite story. Now, it's a little bit long, but you'll find it is well worth it. Now, we try to consolidate it down a bit. The full version of this is on my YouTube channel, Jim Harold, youtube.com/Jim Harold. And you can check that out. But the point is, this is just an unbelievable story. And I don't mean that I don't believe it. It just seems to be unbelievable. Actually, we had recorded this back in the early 2010s, I think, audio-wise. I felt so strongly about it that I took a camera person and we traveled up to Michigan in 2019, right before the pandemic, and recorded what you're about to see with T.I. And my goodness, what a story. The story of the Roadhouse Saloon.
Midsummer night, and my friend Bob and I had traveled about an hour and a half from where we were staying to go hear a band play in Ashland. And Bob was friends with the band, and we listened to the band and we stayed after they played, left there maybe 1:30, 2 o'clock. Nobody was left in the bar. They were putting the chairs up, and we got in the car and started driving. Now, it was one of those super dark nights. Like, it was overcast and it was moonless, and where this takes place, there are no city lights, there are no towns, there are no even, you drive by farms and they have those halogen lights by the farms. We're going through woods and there was nothing. It was so dark that it felt like you could not see beyond the headlights. And I started to feel like I really needed to find a bathroom someplace. And so I said, where are we? How much longer do we have? And he said, well, we're about halfway. I'm like, oh, dang, we'll drive faster. I noticed this bright red glow off to the left. And as I looked, I saw neon signs on. And it had the open sign, and it was a sign that said the Roadhouse Saloon. And it was on the other side, so we had to kind of come back and cross the 2 lanes. And then we pulled into this gravel parking lot, and there were a few cars, maybe 3 or 4 old beat-up cars. But what was unusual is it was really late, and it was probably almost 3 o'clock in the morning by now. Maybe just shy of that or just after, I'm not positive. I didn't notice the clock, but it was still open, and there were cars. So I said, oh boy, I'm saved. Pull in. We got in, and I got out of the car. Bob got out of the car. And so we walked in, and as we walked in, everybody in the place turned and looked at us and almost simultaneously went, hi. It felt like almost we were expected. So Bob went to the bar, and it had this big horseshoe-shaped bar as you come in the door. And then the bathrooms were around this side. And as I walked around, there was a pool table, and there were 2 guys that were standing at the pool table leaning on their, holding a drink, I believe, and leaning on their pool cues. And then there was a dance floor, and I just went past them and found the bathroom. And when I went in, the lights were off. So I did what I had to do, washed my hands, put the paper towel in the bin, and since the light was out when I came in, I turned the light out as I went out, and Bob walks up to me, and he's got a long neck beer and hands it to me. And as we were pulling in, this is a really important part that I left out. He said, Roadhouse Saloon, I've been wanting to come here. And he said that people were talking that they had this big mural painted there. It was this huge wall, probably a 17 feet or something, big, huge wall, mural. And so he said, oh, this is great, we get to go in and see this mural. So he hands me the beers as I come out. And we turn and start walking towards the mural. And as I come out of the bathroom, this young man comes walking up to me, and he's holding a beer, and it's a glass beer, and it's kind of sloshing, he's teetering a little bit, and he smiles, his big smile, and his teeth are kind of discolored, and he says, hey, you want to dance? And I walk with a cane, as I said, and so I just pointed to the cane and said, sorry, I can't dance. It was like, once again, the cane saves me. And so he just kind of wanders off to the jukebox. And as we're walking towards the mural, the jukebox was on the left, and it was this antique Wurlitzer, beautiful jukebox. It was the round topped with the neon lights inside, and it played vinyl 45 records. This was, you don't see those anymore except in museums. And he goes over and he drops a coin in, and the record goes down. And as we started walking across the floor, the song that started playing was Chubby Checker, Let's Twist Again, like we did last summer. And everybody just kind of stands there, and a couple of ladies get up, a few people get up and just kind of shuffle, dance as we walk across the dance floor to the mural. And we're looking at it, and it was a very unusual painting. It was like a stage backdrop, almost in the way it was done, because the picture sort of faded out at the edges. So it looked like it was trying to create an illusion that was part of the saloon. Although the characters were larger than life, if you were at the other side of the room, you could almost imagine a movie scene on the other side. But the way it was painted was with really, like, almost garish colors, bright, the perspective was a little bit off, and it looked like it was bottom lit, like old, footlights coming up. So it was kind of it was disturbing to look at it to me. It was not a pleasant, it wasn't like, oh, look, the Old West. It was like, oh, that's, it's kind of weird. So we're just looking at it, and the record stops, and then I think it was about this time that Bob turns and looks over to his side, and he's looking up at the mural, and he's looking at the guys, and the guys never started playing pool. I don't think I heard pool balls at all. I didn't notice other people. They were holding drinks, but I didn't notice anybody else drinking or really doing something, except when the guy by the jukebox put another quarter in. And this was after there was probably a 10-minute break between the first song, and he put the quarter in, maybe not that long, 5, another quarter or whatever in, probably a dime in a Wurlitzer, and the same song started playing. And once again, people just kind of stood up and just kind of, so like the ladies walked out onto the dance floor, and the pool guys set the stuff down and just kind of danced a little bit, and then the music stopped, and they just, without talking, nobody was talking, it was a bar, and they just went back to their places. And that's when Bob noticed. We watched him go back, and we're just kind of looking at each other like, this is just weird, these people are odd. And he looks at the mural, and he looks at the guys over by the pool table, and he nudges me. He says, T.I., look at those guys there. And there was in the painting, there was a gambling table, and there were gamblers sitting around the table. And he said, look at those guys, and then look at the guys at the pool table. And he says, don't, be nonchalant. So I'm looking at it, and it was them. It wasn't identical, but it was clearly them. I mean, it was the same body types, the same facial features. They were being depicted in that painting. And so we started looking at the other characters in the mural and finding them in the bar. And every person in the mural was in the bar. We got it was weird at first, and they said, these people are obviously regulars. And wouldn't it be a cool thing to do if you were a mural artist to take the people, maybe they're the owners, maybe they're here celebrating a party or something, and so it's their place and they're in the mural. And we said, yeah, that's probably right. And so he said, well, let's ask them. So our beers were empty, so we walked back across the big dance floor, and as we walked across the big dance floor for a third time, the guy by the jukebox, who never left the side of the jukebox except to dance, put another coin in the jukebox, and it played the exact same song. Now that sent shivers up my spine, and it does right now still, because if I was smart, I'd have left right then. But 2 times, person play a song 2 times in a row, that could be your favorite song. That could be a memory, that you want to redo. But 3 times and nothing else in between, that was just weird. So I said, maybe we should just go. And Bob says, oh, no, I want to find out who painted this. I want to find out more about the mural. Let's ask the bartender. And so I'm like, okay, we go back to the bar and order another beer. And Bob says, so, is that all you guys in the mural? And the bartender's leaning on the bar like this, smiling, and says nothing. And I'm like, did the artist paint you guys in the mural over there? And he's just no answer. Like, and so the music is still playing. And as we're halfway across the dance floor, I look at the mural, and there's 2 more figures in that mural. And there was the swinging saloon doors off in the corner off to the side there. And it looked like there were 2 shadows, and it was like gray, no features. You couldn't see any features, but you could see that it had color, was starting to, I can't say, I didn't see it change, but it looked like it was painted to start give the illusion of color coming in. And I noticed that the woman, and it was a woman and a man, and it looked like us. The height difference, curly hair, you could see it, but it was still just a silhouette. And I had a pink skirt, a pink longer skirt on, and the color in the skirt was pinkish. And I grabbed Bob's arm, and that's when I noticed that the woman had a cane. Now, I gotta tell you, if it was just, I've got shivers all over my body right now retelling this, because I feel like it was this close to never coming out of that place. If I hadn't had the cane, I may not have realized what was really going on. And what was really going on is we were starting to become part of that mural. Not become, I don't know how that is. I don't know how that works or what that is. But boy, I saw that cane and we looked at each other and we said, let's get the bleep out of here. And we turned and he kind of grabbed me and pulled me along. We just dropped the beers on the thing, and everybody, as we were leaving, stood up and just watched us go. And the music is playing for the fourth time, Let's Twist Again, like we did last summer. And we hit that door and pulled the door open, and the guy at the Wurlitzer, he says, wait, and the door closed behind us, and bam, pitch darkness and no sound. And I froze because I didn't know where my footing was, and I did not want to fall down and get stuck there. And both of us just stopped, and Bob said, don't move, I'm gonna go start the car and turn the lights on. And he did. He turned the lights on. He came back and he got me, and as we were pulling out, it wasn't lights on the outside of a wooden building. It was windows that had the beer signs and the open sign and the Roadhouse Saloon sign, and those windows were dark and the signs were all off. And as we turned, he goes, and the gravel is going up behind the car. And as we turned, there were no cars in the parking lot. And nobody left when we were in there. Nobody arrived, nobody left. And we pulled out and got back on that highway and didn't say a word. We just kind of sat there stunned, just feeling like stunned, just overwhelmed at what had just happened. And finally, we looked at each other and said, did that really happen? And Bob said, yeah, that just really happened. And I said, what happened? He said, I have no idea what happened, but we just got out of there by the skin of our teeth.
I told you it was good, but it's not over yet. T.I. is a lot braver than I am. So she decided to go back.
About a week later, we planned a field trip to the Roadhouse Saloon. I did not want to go back to the Roadhouse Saloon. I did not want to see that mural. I felt like there was no reason I would ever have to go back there again in my life. But my sisters and my cousins talked me into it. Although it was about 8 o'clock at night, it was still light. Up there, it stays light till 10:30 in the summertime. So we all go up, we walk in, and the place on the dance floor, there are tables set up. People are eating food. There's the mural. The bar's there exactly the same. The thing is set up the same, except the jukebox is not a Wurlitzer. The jukebox is one that's got CDs. And it was a completely different machine. And I have no idea how that could happen. It wasn't like I went in there and Bob and I together hallucinated the change. So I went up to the bartender, it was this young woman, and I said, I didn't want to say what had happened because, they'd call a physician or something or somebody else. And so I just said, hey, where's the other bartender? And she said, what other bartender? And I said, well, Saturday night, there was another bartender here. She said, no, there was no other bartender. There was a young guy, I said. He was really friendly and just really nice guy. And she said, no, my dad owns this place and he and I are the only ones who tend bar here. And I said, I'm sure it was this place. I came into this place and it was really late, it was well after 2 o'clock, close to 3 o'clock in the morning. And she said, my dad and I tended bar Saturday night and we closed at midnight. And I just went, and my sisters were. So we stayed a short time and then we left, and I have not been back since.
And there you have it, my favorite campfire story of all time. And again, that respect that we try to give people and give them space to tell their stories, no matter how incredible. And I got to say, everyone that we've shared with you today, I believe it 100%. Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for Ryan giving us the opportunity to add something to this great event. And if you want to find out everything that I do, you can go to jimharold.com. You can find my YouTube channel I mentioned earlier. And also you can subscribe to the Paranormal Podcast and Jim Harold's Campfire, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you. Have a great day. Stay safe. And as I always say on my shows, stay spooky. Bye-bye.